there's a couple of ways through which a low-carb diet is going to reduce thyroid activity. The first that's worth mentioning, so we mentioned already that the stress hormones are going to be major drivers of a reduced T4 to T3 conversion and increased T4 to reverse T3 conversion, and also reduced thyroid hormone production at the thyroid. All of those hormones, those stress hormones, are going to be heavily involved in a shift toward a low-carb diet. And then after that initial shift, elevations, especially in glucagon, will exist long-term. And this is something we talked about in that Bravo series, so I'll refer back to those episodes. So that alone will impair T4 to T3 conversion and increase the production of reverse T3. But there are some other factors as well. So one is low insulin. So in a low-carb diet, you tend to have a much lower insulin to glucagon ratio, much lower insulin, much higher glucagon. And the insulin itself actually has some effects on the thyroid hormone conversion, where not only does insulin directly lower the production of these stress hormones like glucagon, which is one way through which it improves T4 to T3 conversion, but also it has direct effects in increasing the deiodinase enzyme, the D1 specifically, and which helps to increase the T4 to T3 conversion. So having enough insulin, again, this is not the same as insulin resistance or diabetes, which will come, I'll mention that later, that's a state of reduced thyroid hormone conversion. But in the context of good glucose metabolism and good metabolism overall, having enough insulin throughout the day actually helps to increase thyroid hormone conversion. Again, this goes directly with the larger biological context that we've talked about, where carbohydrates are a major source of really efficient energy production. I'll link back to episodes discussing that. And so we want to have signals that increase our metabolism when we have enough carbs available. Insulin acts as one of those signals, as well as decreasing the stress hormones. So that's one aspect here that's particularly important. Another aspect is just that in the research, looking at high carb versus low carb diets in all sorts of different contexts, you see that in the high carb diets, you have increased T3 and decreased reverse T3 relative to the low carb diets. Again, just exemplifying that this actually does happen in practice. And there's a great paper discussing the effects of thyroid health in a low carb diet. And this is specifically in a ketogenic diet. And again, we've talked about how the few mechanisms through which this can decrease thyroid activity. We have the increased stress hormones, which affect the conversion and production. We also have the increased free fatty acids as well, displacing the thyroid hormone from the binding protein. So that's another factor as well. And then low insulin too. So this paper is titled Changes of Thyroid Hormonal Status in Patients Receiving Ketogenic Diet Due to Intractable Epilepsy. And they state, ketogenic diet, which is high in fat and low in carbohydrates, mimics the metabolic state of starvation and is used therapeutically for pharmacoresistant epilepsy. It is known that generation of triiodothyronine, or T3, from thyroxine, or T4, decreases during fasting periods. In their study, they concluded that the ketogenic diet causes thyroid malfunction and L-thyroxine treatment may be required. Of course, we might not agree with that last part, where I don't think providing T4, thyroxine, would actually be helpful in this state. But if you look at the study, what they basically found was increased incidences of hypothyroidism and reduced T3, elevated reverse T3 in these patients on the ketogenic diet. In this case, they're doing it for epilepsy. So long-term ketogenic diet. Yeah. Do you want to hop in here, Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. So they're kind of like, some of them are like a little funny. So yeah, like there's the idea that you don't ever need an ounce of carbohydrate ever because your body produces its own carbohydrate it's like, yes, your body will produce its own carbohydrate through glucagon and elevated glucocorticoids. And that also comes at a cost here, is what we're seeing with the lowered insulin levels and the decreased thyroid hormone production, etc. So like, again, and this deal goes to the conversation of like, what is optimal versus what can you get by on. So the goal is to just not get by on the stress hormones and to these backup pathways that are also directly lowering metabolism. If you look at and you understand these relationships, what the body is saying, or I guess we'll personify the body here, which I don't know if you can personify the body, but what the body is saying here is that you don't have adequate exogenous energy substrate coming in, and so you'll have to produce this energy substrate from other components within your diet, amino acids, glycerol, backbones of fats, etc. and then it's subsequently lowering the metabolic rate in response to that, because that process is a bit of a catabolic process, right? There's only so many amino acids and so many glycerol backbones you can harvest to produce the glucose versus just taking it in exogenously. So it's the body's essentially, all right, we're going to have to start breaking things down. We're not going to drastically increase the rate at which we're doing this. So it starts to decrease that thyroid hormone production, basically takes the foot off the gas pedal for energy metabolism. So that's what you're seeing there. And the key that's what you're seeing with the insulin increasing thyroid hormone. It's the body saying, hey, it's basically like it's the cells are having a party, right? It's like, we got glucose, we got carbohydrate, and that's what the insulin signaling. And then with the glucagon and whatnot, it's basically saying, all right, back to work, boys. We don't have any more of the substrate. We're gonna have to produce some of this stuff, kind of like hard times mentality. And as far as the ketogenic diet, I was gonna mirror the same thing that you said. Is like, I don't think in this state providing T4 because you have alterations in TSH is on this like very low carb diet is actually going to solve the problem. The other thing is I would question is if they're diagnosing based on T4 values, then I'd be curious if they would maybe see an increase in actual hypothyroid state in these ketogenic diet patients. Because if they started to look at things like free T3 values and total T3 values, and then reverse T3 values in some of their ratios, and start to see like maybe their T4 and their TSH values are fine, but their actual T3 values and the ratios of free T3 or total T3 and reverse T3 are skewed. So they're actually at a cellular hypothyroid state, which would, if you were diagnosing based on that, perhaps you'd have a higher proportion of patients that are in a hypothyroid state on this ketogenic diet. And then T3 therapy may possibly be better. Although again, throwing T3 therapy on this low carb diet may not necessarily be ideal, because there's a reason the body is lowering that metabolic rate, that metabolic set point with this dietary setup.
Yeah, that's the whole. It is a cohesive, systemic, intelligent, adaptive response. As they said in the quote, the ketogenic diet mimics the metabolic state of starvation. And we know that any removal of carbohydrates mimics that state. Not any, but if you remove carbohydrates enough, it mimics that state. It mimics the fasting state. This response is intentional to turn the metabolism down. And so it should be like, we want that to happen. And if you want to argue that a ketogenic diet is a good thing, then you have to argue that that is a good thing, that the low metabolism and hormesis and stress is what leads to longevity and health. And that's why we spend a lot of time discussing that not being the case in our hormesis series and elsewhere. So yeah, when looking at it through that context and seeing the effects on the thyroid, it makes total sense. It's completely clear.
If you enjoyed that clip, you'll definitely want to download the free Energy Balance Food Guide. The Energy Balance Food Guide will help you determine exactly what to eat to optimally support your metabolism and help you lose weight, improve your digestion, get amazing sleep, boost your energy, and so much more. The food guide makes it extremely easy to get started with a bioenergetic approach to optimizing your health. So head over to jfeldmanwellness.com/guide to download your free Energy Balance Food Guide.